the most insane decision ever.
I just feel like I've been getting gaslit for the past 3 or 4 years. This guy is not qualified.
It's been rejected handily by the American people.
A lot of companies, not a couple. We're talking dozens and dozens of companies are up double-digit percentage points this morning.
Insane events. Insane events. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Adventure Capitalist Podcast. My name is Austin Bronner, and I'm here with my co-host, Cody Shirk, and we are recording after a monumentous day in American history. The election is done, decided over. There was a lot of questions about whether or not it was going to be close. It was not close. It was an absolute blowout for Trump, and we're sitting here in the morning. We want to record this episode and talk a little bit about what happened and what happens next, because more important than actually what happened, it's what is going to happen next. So Cody, how do you feel this morning, Wednesday, November 6th at 11 a.m.?
Probably too good. I feel a bit vindicated personally with my personal feeling of the way direction things were going globally, but especially in the US. I feel like we just took a sharp turn in a good way. And I also am just very, very positive in general. That said, in the back of my mind, I've got some like major risks still. Like there's little red lights blinking in the back of my head that I'm still very cognizant about that we'll cover, but overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah. I think for me, the level of vindication comes not from the outcome, but from my understanding of what was going to happen. I was not surprised by this at all. And I think that this caught a lot of people with their feet flat, right? And I think sometimes I wonder if I'm in an echo chamber or if what I'm reading is actually accurate or if I'm on the wrong side, whatever. But this was not surprising to me. And in that way, it kind of is vindicating that I have a pulse on what is going on. So we're going to dive into it. But first, before we do it, I want to say welcome to all of our new listeners, people who joined us over the last couple of weeks. And I want to give a quick shout out because we got an excellent review this last week. It says from Pants Party 11, shout out Pants Party 11. Good pod, unique, interesting pod with unique investing ideas that you won't hear in a lot of other places. It gets to the point without a ton of fluff, which is refreshing as well as it keeps it short. Thank you, Pants Party 11, for your review. Love to hear it. If you guys like the podcast, go and write us a review. It's the best way to support us. Let's dive in today. So what I want to start with today, Cody, and not to, dive too much into what happened, but I want to kind of set the stage and go through this last couple of years, because I think that it can be forgotten in the midst of all the chaos of, people believing something was going to happen and then another thing happened, or maybe you were listening to this podcast and you thought you thought this outcome is what was going to happen. I want to go through some of the key moments that led to this outcome, from my opinion. So let's start with going back to May 2020. I think one of the key things that was overlooked at the time, but led to something happening 4 years later, was when Lorena Gonzalez, who is a commissioner, I believe, in California, tweeted, "Fuck Elon Musk." And she was responsible, her department was responsible for some sort of a permitting thing. I can't remember exactly what it was. And he replied, "Message received." And he then moved all of his business to Texas. That was May 2020. That's 4 years ago, not that long ago. When we think about Elon being such a massive key component, a key player in this election, 4 years ago, he was a Democrat. And this was in my opinion, kind of the lead domino, led to June 2021, the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. I think whether you think it was a good idea or not to get out, I think most Americans think it was. The optics and how badly that was botched left a stain on our country that we are never going to be able to wash out. And that led to a lot of people questioning what was going on at the leadership level. Again, back in the middle of COVID, then December 2021, I remember this distinctly. There was a press conference with Joe Biden where he was talking about the upcoming winter. And he had a quote. He said, for the unvaccinated, this is going to be a winter of severe illness and death. And he was pushing everybody to get vaccinated, to get boosted. And this was after enough time had gone by where we could all see that people who were not vaccinated weren't dying in the way that they were being told. And it was just another chink out of trust being pulled away from the administration. You move to August 2021. Tesla was not invited to the electric vehicle summit. I'm keying on a lot of the things that happened to Elon Musk because, again, he played an outsized role in this election. The most insane decision ever. You have an electric vehicle summit and you don't invite the leader of the company selling more electric vehicles than all other car manufacturers combined.
It wasn't even close.
It wasn't
Yeah,
even close.
they invited GM, and GM had like, I don't know, it was a ridiculously small number of vehicles on the road. It was such a smear on Elon and Tesla. It was embarrassing.
Complete joke. Pissed Elon off again. April 2023, another key player in this whole election, Bobby Kennedy announces his run for president. Right at that moment, he announced, and there was a lot of excitement, at least on X and on Twitter, and it was pretty much completely ignored by the Democrats. One underrated thing that I think actually influenced the election in a way that people don't think about was when Jared Kushner went on Lex Fridman, October 2023. I don't know if you remember this. Did you listen to that episode?
I think a little bit. I don't remember exactly.
So he went on. This is somebody who really people had not heard from, right? He'd been kind of behind the scenes. He goes on Lex Fridman, gives like a 3-hour episode. It was actually a 2-part because they recorded it October 6th, and then the attacks in Israel happened on October 7th. And so it was extremely timely. And I remember this episode because I had this view of Jared Kushner. And then I listened to this episode for about 3 hours, which was extremely poignant because the attacks in Israel had just happened. And he was talking all about negotiations in the Middle East. And from what I heard about Jared Kushner was that he was basically a loser, somebody who had radical views, was a Trumper, all these different things. And then I listened to him in long form and I'm like, this guy is incredibly thoughtful. And I know a lot of other people had the same outcome from that. Well, moving forward, Bobby Kennedy goes independent October 23rd, October 2023, same month. Big impact on that. I think outsized impact. June 27th, Biden and Trump had their debate number 1. That was the defining moment. Nobody will ever forget how bad that debate was. There was all the talk, really for the 3 months leading up, like, is Biden going to perform? And everyone said he's going to be, sharp as a tack, all these different things. We realized on air his brain was pudding. What were your, pure. Do you remember that? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised about it. I think this is the part that I don't want to like get too left, right, or whatever.
Yeah.
I just feel like I've been getting gaslit for the past 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
About stuff where I'm watching and I'm like, am I crazy? Like, this guy doesn't make sense, or like this administration is not, projecting strength. They're making like really crazy priorities. Like, what is going on here? And I'm like, well, maybe I'm out of touch. Maybe I'm just like, this like independent guy that's just totally out of touch. And then you see him in that debate and you're like, this guy is not qualified. I don't mean qualified. Like, he doesn't have the experience in politics. He's been a lifelong politician. He's out of touch with like being able to operate his mind. And
totally.
Everyone knew that. Everyone knew that in the back of their mind. Even the people that supported him knew he was probably not at his tip top. And then that was just the showcase of what was actually going on. And it was also confirmation for a lot of the public that like we've been getting fucked with. People are messing with our minds. There's propaganda out there. And this was the confirmation that, hey, like this is what's actually going on. Is I got a guy who shouldn't be there.
They weren't cheap fakes. It was real. I remember that specifically from the debate. I'm going to run through the last couple of things. July 13th, Trump was shot, Butler, Pennsylvania, leading to the most iconic photo, one of the most iconic photos in American history. Truly an insane, insane event. Just a week later, Biden withdraws from the race under dubious circumstances. Very strange, just a Twitter post. And then it quickly rallied.
It was a coup. Let's just say it was a coup. He got totally ousted.
It looked like a coup, smelled like a coup, was probably a coup. And very quickly, less than 2 weeks later, Kamala was nominated August 5th. She accepted the nomination. And things went well for her, literally for the first couple of months, until I think a key turning point was the October 1st disastrous VP debate between JD Vance and Tim Walz. And that, if you look at the polymarket betting from that day on, that really was the moment things started, the doom loop started, and she started to do a lot of interviews, and it just went downhill from there. And it led to a stomping. So that's kind of the key moments. I will say this, as a lifelong Democrat, one of my hopes from this election was that they would be stomped, so just decimated, because it was going to force them to make changes that otherwise they will not have made. They're going to have to get rid of a lot of the people that are leadership in the Democratic Party, the Pelosi's, the Chuck Schumers, replace them with new blood, new ideas. There are people that are compelling and have really good ideas in the Democratic Party, but they have not been able to rise to the top because of the system of the machine and the corruption. And my hope is that this is a huge wake-up call, and that they will field a candidate in the future that has the American public in mind. Otherwise, they're going to have JD Vance in the White House for the next 12 years, is my personal opinion. And so let's dive in. I want to go into that's the run up of what happened. I think it's interesting to just look at it in a timeline chronologically.
I think the reason you did that, just to be clear, the reason you did that is because if you had shown this to somebody without them actually experiencing the brainwashing of the past 3 years, the outcome that has happened, meaning it's November 6th in the morning, it would be very clear. But there's still this like air of shock. Oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Well, we just read this list of events that makes it pretty clear why.
Insane events.
Yeah.
Insane events. And the whole time, there was a level of, I don't know. I guess I don't know the best way to describe what was going on. I think it just was propaganda or wishful thinking in terms of the media. I think let's start with what it means for, first of all, for your money. If you're listening, I want to start with that, because we've talked about this a little bit in previous episodes. But Cody, what do you think what do you think this election means for wealth, money, for the average person, for the investor? Let's start with stock markets. Where do you think, what's happening, and where do you think they go from here?
So everything's ripping right now. Stocks are ripping. What the NASDAQ is up 2.5% right now. Again, this is the morning of November 6th. People, the reality is setting in that Trump is going to be president. There's no like, hey, we got to recount anything. Like, this is going to happen. So markets are ripping. Crypto is absolutely just skyrocketing. That's because it's a risk on environment, but also because we have somewhat of a pro crypto administration, or at least we think that's what's going to happen, versus the past several years with the Biden administration.
Gensler's done.
Yeah.
Gensler's looking for a job.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting fired. A lot of people are. So I think there's this risk on environment in general across pretty much all markets, except for some international markets, what I'll mention in a little bit. And then the safe haven assets, which I called this. I've said this multiple times, and I got shit on by a lot of people. Gold is pulled back big time. Silver pulled back. Platinum, everything that was a safe haven assets pulled back this morning. And the exact same thing happened in 2016 when Trump got elected. And when in 2016, I made this mistake because I was thinking, you make a gold trade, you make a safe haven asset trade prior to this Hillary Trump election. And the reality is the market views Trump as pro-business, so safe haven assets are going to go down in value, and that's exactly what's happening this morning. So again, super bullish across all markets. I do want to say though, the valuations that many of these companies are now into, especially after this morning's bump. I mean, a lot of companies, like a lot of companies, not a couple. We're talking dozens and dozens of companies are up double-digit percentage points this morning, and major companies too. We're talking
Yeah.
billions, if not like I don't know how many hundreds of billions of dollars going to be added to market cap today. We'll find out at the end of this trading day, but it's significant, and that was already on super high valuations. That have been this high for quite some time. So unless we have unbelievable growth in the short term, these valuations still make me really nervous.
I think what we're seeing right now is the Trump bump,
Yeah.
but that doesn't solve any of the debt problem and the reality of what has been promised and the whole idea of a Department of Government Efficiency, right? Elon coming in and cutting government jobs, cutting government waste. All those things are going to have an impact on GDP. And I wrote a piece a couple weeks ago about where I think some of the markets are going, given the fact that gold and stocks have rallied by 40% over the last year. It's like, regardless of who won, there's still significant problems. And my feeling is that we're getting the bump, but eventually the bill is going to come due, and a lot of the necessary to take your medicine, a lot of the things that have to be done are going to lead to some choppiness in the markets. And so
I sold some of my positions this morning. I probably sold. I'm a pretty concentrated investor. I only carry between probably 6 and 10 core positions. I probably sold 3 or 4 of them this morning. Saw the bump. I got long-term cap gains on them. I say, you know what? I'm up pretty big. Let's cash out right now. You never lose money taking a profit. It's a good quote to live by.
Totally.
And again, could growth go a lot or continue to expand? Yes, it could, but we're still pretty frothy in a lot of valuations.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that I feel like people are most concerned about on an international level, right? We're going to potentially get to domestic stuff, but let's talk about international because that's really where we're more interested. So let's talk a little bit about China, right? So
China,
obviously China is still a huge threat here. And Trump really is the person that broke through and shifted the Overton window about what we could talk about in regards to China as an enemy, an adversary. He was the one that shifted the entire policy, and now he's back in office. Where do you think? What do you think this means for our relationship with China? What do you think the Chinese are feeling? And are we safer or less safe from a hot war with China?
Well, let's clarify a couple historical events first. So Trump initially initiated a bunch of, let's just say, adjustments to the way we relate with China, mostly because of huge trade deficits and things that were just not fair. We got to this point where we were super reliant on China for a number of things. And by the way, we still are very reliant on many things having to do with China. But Trump tried to readjust that when he was in office. And that definitely did not make a lot of the Chinese happy in the upper levels. Well, when Biden got elected, he didn't reverse any of that. Biden, in fact, increased a lot of the proposals and measures that Trump took. So, it's very tempting when to say, left versus right or whatever. The general U.S. Direction with China.
Trump moved it. Trump's policies became America's policies.
Right. But I think what I'm getting at is, though, the direction of America, regardless of left or right, was on this path. Trump initiated it, but the left or Biden has certainly carried that torch. So what I'm getting at is Trump is now in a situation where he has to decide, hey, did Biden do enough? Did he do too much? Did he focus on military operations too much and not enough on trade? I think traditional U.S. politicians fall back on military measures to project strength and try and influence certain countries versus I believe Trump will try and push specific economic and deal making initiatives to persuade certain countries. And we saw that when he was in office. We saw it with China, we saw it with North Korea, we saw it with Iran, we saw it with Venezuela, we saw it with pretty much every country that Trump dealt with. He's a deal maker. So Trump's in this situation where he's got to figure out, okay, do I ramp up our military or just continue our military resistance? I'm using an air quotes there because we're trying to encircle China right now on the first island chain. Or do we shift and go back to the negotiating board on the trade issues? And I don't really know what he'll do, but I do think it's important to note that regardless of whatever Trump does, China is continuing to ramp up their military strength as it pertains specifically to occupying and operating in the South China Sea and the threat that they are going to take on Taiwan. And the beauty of communist China is that they plan in life cycles and generations, whereas the U.S. Plans in 4-year presidential cycles. So we're kind of like on two different wavelengths on how we're trying to combat each other, and we'll have to see what Trump does here in the next 4 years.
I think one of the benefits of having him in office is that, from the perspective of another country, they don't know what to expect, right? There's a clear expectation of what's going to happen from the Biden administration. It's the same China policy and it's the same foreign policy that they've always gotten. And one thing that Trump brings in is, in my opinion, is a completely new political order. And a lot of the sacred cows that we've had are up for slaughter. And we don't know where that's going to go. But I think from the perspective of the Chinese, they're probably looking at this, well, we had an idea of what the policy was. This changes it. And now we're going to be up in the air and potentially on their back foot a little bit. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. Russia, interesting, right? One of Trump's biggest campaign promises was to deliver the end of the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, right? Maybe hyperbole, probably hyperbole, but a very clear, appealing promise to the American people, and one that I think actually swung the election more than most people even think, because it's a very unpopular war, and that type of a promise is something that appeals to the average American. So, where do you think it goes from here?
With Russia,
do you think he's going to be able to get it done? First of all, can he get it done in 24 hours?
That's a tough bet to make. I mean, it's kind of one of those things like, I don't want to bet against the U.S. I don't want to bet against Musk, and I don't even know if I want to bet against Trump anymore, just because the past I guess almost 72 hours has been pretty well.
I mean, the reality is it doesn't even matter if it's 24 hours or 24 days or
right. But to be to be clear, I think that whatever happens is no one's going to like it. The U.S. is going to feel really, really cheated because we sent so much money to Ukraine to effectively get to a point that is not in any way positive for the U.S., meaning that Ukraine won. Like, it's not going to happen. Russia's going to be pissed because they're not actually going to get what they wanted, which is whether it's taking over all of Ukraine or making their point. They're not going to be happy. Ukraine's not going to be happy because, well, there's no win for them there. NATO's not going to be happy. Like, no one's going to be happy in whatever deal that happens. But I will say that some of the best deals in business typically result in all sides feeling not very good.
Being slightly dissatisfied.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I would say that Trump is one of the best deal makers in the world. There's a reason why he's president again after never being a politician in his life.
For people who hate him,
like, he's a deal maker.
For people who might listen to that and say, he's just a blowhard, somebody who kind of talks a big game but doesn't actually get it done. One thing that I look at is his coalition that he built by the end of this campaign cycle. You can compare his coalition, Elon Musk. He brought on Bobby Kennedy, who is one of his chief adversaries during most of the campaign, Tulsi Gabbard. He brought on
Vivek,
an all-star
Ron
crew.
Paul now. I mean, this is like dream team for me.
These are like exactly. And then you compare that to who Kamala was able to bring on, Mark Cuban.
The whole P. Diddy gang, all the actors
that's
who are
it, right? Like you can't. And what it comes down to is he was cutting deals to make it worthwhile for those people to suck it up and deal with him and join his campaign. I mean, it's quite impressive.
Well, that's what I read, these opinion pieces or articles that you see in the news about how Elon Musk is dumb, or these certain billionaires are so stupid, or Trump did this or that. What an idiot! And it's like, hello, scoreboard. They're some of the richest people in the world and most powerful people in the world for a reason. You may not like them, but they're really good at what they do, which is making deals and playing the social game and understanding how to manage money and make investments. Like, again, you may not like it, but if they're so dumb, then why aren't you the one that did this? They're very good at what they're doing.
I mean, Elon's the best in the world at figuring out what is the most important thing, the smallest lever that needs to be pushed, and push it. I mean, it was very interesting. He decided that Pennsylvania was the place where the election was going to be decided. So he literally just moved there and ran his own town halls every single day. I was listening to a clip that he said he determined that the Amish were very dissatisfied with the way that they had been treated, especially the farmers, and that raw milk and a lot of the stuff that they were creating wasn't being able to be sold, and they felt like there's a lot of government overreach. So we decided, well, that's where we're going to put a lot of our time and energy, and ended up creating a bus system to be able to bring in hundreds of thousands of Amish who don't typically vote into the cities to be able to vote, because they can ride in buses, they just can't drive them themselves. And
I'm laughing because there's a parody song by Weird Al Yankovic. It's called it was originally from Coolio, Gangster's
Amish Paradise,
but Amish Paradise, and there's a meme, or there's like a video meme going viral of what you just said, which is these Amish on like buses being brought in with that song playing, and it's quite like the most ironic, strange situation you could possibly think of. The tech mogul is bringing in these people who are living like literally without motors in their homes to vote in a situation that they usually don't typically get involved in. It's like the strangest bedfellows of all time.
The strangest. But back to Russia a little bit, because I want to like, I agree with you, right? It's going to be a deal that everyone's dissatisfied with, but from that, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have to sort out, right? There's a lot of sanctions going on in Ukraine. I think one thing that is interesting is, Ukraine is the breadbasket of like Central Europe, Asia, and a lot of the food goes down to Africa. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. As a lot of the wheat fields have been destroyed. There's so many crops that have been destroyed there that's going to have to come back online. What do you see as some of the resources and trade that's going to have to be sorted out from this?
Bigger picture, I think everyone should also understand what's going on here, which is it's a Soviet mindset versus Western mindset. And it's, we've talked about this before. Are we in World War III? Is this Cold War 2.0? But Ukraine is unfortunately an example, or something that people can point to say this is where our conflict is. But really the conflict is much bigger than that. And like you said, it has to do with food trade. It has to do with access to resources, metals, minerals, oil, gas, et cetera, And right now, as we speak, and we've talked about this, about Russia being in Africa right now, they've overthrown 3 governments in the past 3 years: Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, which doesn't seem that important. But the reality is that France and the US were operating in there prior. There was U.S. companies, French companies getting resources out of those countries, and the Russians have gone in there to the Wagner Group and kicked them out. Well, the same thing's happening in southern Africa with other countries, but it's also happening in Latin America. There's a lot of like secret operations going on from the Russians and the U.S., all players. And the point, what I'm getting at, is that whatever happens with this deal made between Russia, U.S., and it sounds so stupid that the U.S. is even making a deal. It's between Ukraine and Russia, technically, or on war terms. But of course, it's this bigger picture, and that just goes to show what's actually going on in the world. But whatever happens there to at least stop the war or stop whatever's going on there, it has much broader implications. So these trade routes that have been completely disrupted over the past couple of years, I don't think they're going to reestablish themselves as they were prior to the invasion of Ukraine. But there's certainly going to be more conflict and readjustments beyond this Ukrainian border that are going to directly affect U.S. consumers and investors because of these shifting trade routes. And I know I'm not really giving an answer of like where the opportunities are, because I don't really know what's going to unfold, but I want to make it clear it's not central to Ukraine with the conflict that's going on with Russia, Ukraine, and NATO and the US.
I think
Ukraine just happens to be that kind of flashpoint.
the bigger picture is something I mentioned earlier. Like, this is a new political order. And there's a very interesting podcast with Ezra Klein talking about how to think about political orders and how that throughout history they kind of go through the US. There are elections that shift and they break the way that the government operates. And this new political order may come in and operate for 20 years between multiple administrations, right? It's a type of thinking. And the thing that's interesting here is that because Trump's way of thinking is so vastly different, specifically in foreign policy, than previous Republican administrations, that there's a lot of incentive to sort things out. And we don't know where things are going to go from here. But to me, there's a lot of hope because we're not serving up the same playbook that is kind of a uniparty. All right, we're going to go and destabilize Russia through Ukraine, fight proxy wars, play the same game that we've always played for the last 20 to 30 years. So that's where some of the excitement for me comes in. And also why I believe, I'll make a prediction here. I think it will get solved by the end of February. That's my prediction.
Okay, I like that. End of February. I don't have an over-under on that, but I will also add that there are some new entanglements which are going to be nearly impossible to unentangle from the U.S. perspective, and that is the relationship that Russia has with Iran now, with North Korea now, and also the relationships that have spawned from those new trade routes forming, which is basically Russians buying Iranian weapons and North Korean weapons, and now using their military and on the battleground. Like, you're not going to unentangle that now. They're much more in bed together.
Yeah, let's move to North Korea. Right, North Korea has been doing more and more missile launches. Trump, for all his craziness, is the only president to have ever met him. Right, him and Dennis Rodman. Which is just the wildest thing. But there's a lot more conflict going on right now between North Korea. Again, North Korea has sent troops to the border in Ukraine, and I think the part that is so insane to me is if you take this whole thing if you take Trump out of this specific moment and you put him up as a candidate in other, let's say, 20 years ago or 15 years ago in other elections, I actually don't think he's that great of a candidate. I think he is specifically suited for the weird shit that is going on right now, right? And when we're talking about Russia, we're talking about North Korea, it's like he's the only dude who's met with Kim Jong-un. He is the guy who has met with Putin. If there's anybody who can get a deal done and de-escalate where we are at,
I'll take the other side of that. I'm going to disagree with you just to well, no, because I disagree. I think that Trump is actually a fantastic candidate for where we are right now in the world, and that's because
that's what I'm saying. He's great for right now.
Right. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's just compare it to past candidates, which are all the presidents since basically Eisenhower have overthrown multiple dozens of other governments around the world instead of physically going to that country, meeting face to face and shaking hands. So, if if we were back in the 50s, well, this actually did happen with the Korean War and all that. Like, Trump went there and freaking walked into North Korea, and everyone is talking smack on him. And I don't know if there was a better way to do it, but that's pretty ballsy of him. But it's also, I think, very diplomatic of a president he flew there, he went there, he made the effort, he met with him. No matter what's happening in North Korea, which is atrocious in terms of human rights violations and blah, I mean, all of that. You can't fault him for, making that effort instead of just saying, hey, we're going to go send the CIA in and try and overthrow the government.
Which has been our typical playbook, right? That's my whole point about it's a new political order. We're going to see different things. I mean, it's the same thing that happened in Saudi Arabia. He went in and had a different... I mean, the Saudis knew what was coming with Obama. They knew what was happening with Obama, and they knew if Hillary won, it would be the same. And when they found out that Trump was going to be the presumptive nominee, they decided to do everything that they could to woo him, and bring him in and reset relations. And that led to one of the most significant peace deals in the Middle East of all time. And I think that there's some opportunity for that same thing to happen again. And yeah, so I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. That's kind of where I stand on it. I think places that are a little bit more confusing, Iran and what's going on with Israel. I think what cost Kamala Harris the election was, if there's one lever that would have ensured that she won, became the next presidential nominee, if she had broken with traditional policy on Israel, I think that she would be the next president. And one of the challenges that she faced was not being able to define how she was different than Biden. And there was not a place where it was more visible than in her policy related to Israel and Palestine and her support, unyielding support for Israel. So it's still an incredibly complex situation, and I don't know what's going to happen. What are your predictions on what happens between Israel, Iran? Does this thing get reset back to zero, or is it further? Are there further escalations? What are your thoughts?
Specifically to Iran and Israel right now as we speak, again, November 6th, the day after the U.S. presidential election. Let's take the U.S. out of it. Israel and Iran are more or less at a tit for tat like battle right now.
Yeah.
One side launches an attack.
Pre-planned missile launches.
Yeah. And then the other side has to.
Israel.
and we're to the point now where they're doing it to save face. Like one side can't just take an attack and not retaliate somehow. So specific to that, how does that wind down? Of course, this has happened literally multiple different times over the past 50 years between countries in this region, and it typically results in some sort of peace treaty and some sort of land give up or border adjustment. That's why Gaza there, that's the West Bank, you got Lebanon, you have DMZ zones. It's just like it's been going on for decades and decades. So specific to that, something like that has to result. How the U.S. handles this, it's gotten to the point now where it's far too complicated, kind of like I was saying before, it's far too entangled to simply fix. And that's because of the Iranian satellite groups that have operated, of course, under Iranian support, but now also operated, let's say, like they're just out of control, meaning they're doing things that maybe not even the Iranians necessarily want them to do. But Israel has shellacked them, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis this morning, by the way, what I'm getting to this whole thing, the Houthis this morning, once President Trump is elected, the Houthis this morning announced that they're done attacking ships in the Red Sea. And it's like...
Is this on Twitter?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So they're done. They're like, all right,
we'll post it here.
There's a meme that's like, "Daddy's home." Okay, no more fighting. And the Houthis made this formal announcement that they were in defensive mode this entire time, and now they're done. And whether Hezbollah or Hamas makes similar announcements, I don't think they necessarily will. The point is that all of this has erupted because there hasn't been a strong power in the world to I don't want to say prevent this. I don't mean militarily, but basically act as if that is unacceptable. But it has been acceptable. The past year has been acceptable.
It has been unacceptable. One of the best quotes from Trump in the whole campaign was him talking about John Bolton and how, him and John Bolton had a massive falling out, but he said that one of the benefits of having John Bolton, his only benefit of having John Bolton with him when he would go and negotiate with other countries, is that John Bolton was such a neocon warmongering nutcase that when he would drag John Bolton into a meeting, everybody, all they could remember, these other foreign leaders, was that John Bolton had unleashed hell on Iraq and Afghanistan, and that he was likely to do it again. And so it led to an air of credibility for Trump that he was going to do something crazy if you've got this absolute nut job sitting next to you, which was one of the funniest, funniest
For
quotes.
me personally, that's why I don't like a lot of the traditional Republican Party, is because
For
of
sure.
warmongers like Bolton. That guy, first of all, he looks goofy. He's got this like push broom mustache. He doesn't. It kind of looks kind of unassuming. But you're right. He's just, we got a problem. Let's bomb it. We got a problem. Let's shoot it. And
Let's bomb it and see what they do.
that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, which is that's not Trump's traditional reaction. And that's probably because he's been in the business world, and it's not an option to do that. It's not an option to go to war, like literally go to war when you're trying to make a business deal. You have to go to the table and get to a deal. And that's also why Trump's style of diplomacy is so unorthodox compared to the deep state, because the deep state are career politicians that have never had to operate in the traditional economy. So their gut reaction is, let's drop bombs or shoot bullets. And so Trump's, I'm going to go to North Korea, shake Kim Jong-un's hand. I'm going to go talk to Putin. I'm going to go, meet with Maduro. He didn't do that.
Make him feel good.
Yeah.
Make some changes.
And make a deal. Like it's so weird to the deep state, but it's probably better. It's probably better for the world to do that.
Here's my big prediction going forward. So I think the Democrats are going to have to shed their skin and start fresh. And I think one of the biggest things that's going to happen going forward when they field a candidate 4 years from now for president, and as they reshape the party, I think they're going to adopt many of Trump's foreign policy ideas as their own. They're going to realize that they've lost and that Americans do not want to be entangled in so many foreign wars. And they're going to field a candidate who has policies regarding entanglements abroad very similar to Donald Trump. And the only way that they're going to have success is if they can bring a candidate forward that holds those same ideas and has the rhetorical ability of an Obama, right? Somebody who can articulate the future in a way that is more positive than Trump can. And I
just don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that looks like, because I feel like traditionally the Republicans, maybe during the 90s and early 2000s, were the party of war.
The Democrats are a party of war right now.
Yeah, it's completely flipped.
This is where there has to be a massive break. This is where it's going to have to. I mean, look what happened when Trump broke the Republican Party. He reshaped it around himself with his ideas. And somebody is going to have to come up, assume a leadership role, take accountability for fielding a absolute bottom of the barrel candidate who could not even articulate the difference between her and the current sitting president, the most easy cakewalk question of all time. And they're going to have to bring forward somebody that has an ability to communicate and do it in a better way than JD Vance. And that's going to be very challenging.
I'm getting it. I don't even know what that person looks like, because whatever policies they're going to be running on, meaning, okay, are the Democrats going to be like, yeah, we're anti-war, but then you can say, well, Trump didn't get us into any wars. And in fact, the person who got us into the most wars recently was the Democrats. So it's very difficult to articulate what the left and right even represent anymore. I think now it's like, there's this religious, abortion side that's, extreme, like Nazi fascists, and then there's a left side. Then I'm like, I don't even know where the line is drawn anymore.
For sure. I mean, it's been
what you're getting to is like fielding a new candidate that represents whatever the new Democratic side is. And frankly, like, they need that. And so do the Republicans. Our entire political system needs a revamp. And this is probably this whatever fourth turning that we've been talking about for a while. Maybe we're at the beginning of that, or maybe second or third inning in that.
What I mean by that is that they got to field a candidate that reflects the new political order. And the new political order is not a neocon-led go to war, fix foreign policy by dropping bombs type political order. It's just not. That's been rejected. And it's been rejected handily by the American people. And so my belief is that going forward for 10 years, 20 years, we're going to be in a period of isolationism. And they're going to need to field, if they want to compete, they're going to have to field a candidate who also believes in that same thing, because otherwise they're going to get stomped again.
Well, let's talk about the isolationist thing. Or do we have any other countries to talk about? Let me talk about Venezuela really quickly. I think Venezuela, to be clear, what Venezuela is doing right now is they're doing trade with Iran and other states that are we can't exactly prove, but Iran we can prove. In fact, there are drone assembly manufacturing facilities in Venezuela that Iran has outsourced to Venezuela. So the point is that we have a country within reach of the U.S. that is clearly,
assembling drones.
yes, but also not like operating on the world order that we want them to operate on. So I think within the next year, the U.S. is going to do something there. I don't know what it's going to be, but I predict something within the next 12 months is going to unfold with Venezuela if they do not self-correct, which would be addressing their current political issue, which is this election that was a complete fraud from Maduro. He just stole it. And they somehow internally fix their economy, which I don't think either one's going to happen. So I just wanted to address Venezuela because I feel like that's a country that like something's going to happen within the Trump presidency with that country. But back to the isolationist part, I want to comment on that as well. That's what the U.S. was before.
Totally.
1800s up to World War I, and even in World War II. Like before then, we're like, no, it's just like don't worry about the rest of the world. Let's be isolationist.
We were isolationist again through most of World War II until the end.
Yeah, totally. So I think the American mind even still is that way. And, there's a lot of posts out on Twitter, LinkedIn right now of people trying to explain how U.S. citizens feel about this election and trying to put it into context for Europeans because it's just a different belief system.
Yeah.
But my point is that when a U.S. citizen thinks about the world, they really don't think about the rest of the world. They think about what's best for America and what's best for them. And yes, it sounds very selfish, but it's also because we're just geographically like by ourselves. We don't really have to deal with any other geopolitical problems. Canada is more or less a 51st state to the U.S. They speak the same language, the same culture. We get along great. And then Mexico.
And so is Mexico.
Yeah, same. I
mean, Mexico, so many Mexicans live in America. And if you live anywhere in the South, a large percentage of your population is Mexican Americans. Mm-hmm. And the culture is also aligned with Mexico. It's a friendly neighbor. Obviously, there are problems and issues and a lot of that comes down to poverty and crime. But at the core,
we're talking two languages, Spanish, English. Pretty much everyone
exactly.
speaks in Spanish and English along, the southern border area. And like we get along and compared to another country, maybe the Middle East, where they have very contentious borders. My point with all this is that we have this isolationist viewpoint that is within the fabric of Americana. And it's not this selfish viewpoint. It's just reality for us. When you're growing up in middle America, you don't really have to worry about anything else. We have tons of oil. We have tons of gas. We have natural resources. We have water. We have an economy that works. We have rule of law. We have a blending of all kinds of cultures and food. So like there's no real need to think outside the borders.
Beautiful places to take vacations to. Yes. We've got national parks. It's incredible.
So my point with all that is that if Trump does these crazy things that he has proposed, which is these super high tariffs and eliminating income taxes and all that stuff, I know it sounds crazy, but it's actually, if you do it on paper, it's actually very possible. And the reason why it's possible is because we do have the ability to operate by ourselves without doing much trade internationally. Yes, for the past 50 years, we've become more reliant on other countries, but we can reverse course. We are not a Switzerland that is low on natural resources. We are not a Japan that doesn't have tons of land and all that stuff. The reason why the Swiss are so good at negotiations and banking and all that is because they've had to make an economy that relies on very good diplomacy. The US doesn't necessarily need that for their internal economy. So what I'm getting to with all this is that for the next 10 whatever years, if Trump is able to change a lot of these tax policies and ways that the U.S. operates, the U.S. is absolutely capable of becoming more isolationist, and that is going to play some pretty big, or it's going to have some pretty big ripple effects for other countries that do rely on the U.S. economy.
And I think the big outstanding thing in my mind that we haven't really addressed, we touched on a little bit, is whether or not he's going to be able to reduce the spiraling debt, and whether or not he can bring that. I mean, it's going to be an unpopular process. The whole
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Of trying to cut down the debt is going to be something that tests the limits of this administration, because it's going to be almost universally hated by every American. Not the outcome of it, but the process of
The
doing it, because
process.
it's going to
It's what
feel
Malay is doing in
really bad.
Argentina. It's
Yes.
austerity that the Greeks have had to gone through for the past 15 years now. The Greeks are getting their teeth kicked in. Their quality of life is super low, but their GDP to debt is going lower right now. Their GDP is rising. Greece is recovering, but it's taken them, almost 2 decades to reverse course. And during that time, they really had to sacrifice a lot. The Argentinians right now, they're having a tough time, but economically, they're turning around and they're doing a really good job. And the U.S. does have some really tough challenges. And the way that Trump and the U.S. can overcome that is we, of course, need to cut spending, and that's going to require probably an entire overhaul of the government, which is going to make a ton of people pissed and put some people in some tough situations. But the flip side of that is we can also grow. I think that one false way to look at business and countries in general is that it's not a zero sum game. Like, you can make the pie bigger, and one way to get ahead of this debt issue is to grow production and grow productivity. Hey, we're in the age of AI, we're in the age of exponential tech, and if we can leverage all of that in a proper way, we can grow our productivity to take care of a lot of these budget issues. That's not to say we're going to have austerity measures for a variety of government programs like retirement systems and pensions that probably are going to have to get cut. But I do think there's a balance there, and that's why long term I'm super bullish the U.S. and anybody who bets against the U.S. right now, regardless, even if it was a candidate we didn't like, it's a tough bet to make.
It's a tough bet. It's like betting against Elon Musk.
Totally, don't do it. It's the
Don't
widowmaker
do it.
trade.
I'll kind of wrap it up on my end by saying I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that if anything, it was an election that made it clear that misinformation and disinformation, whatever, the best counter to bad information is more information. And the American people decided that they would rather choose to support the First Amendment and to support the freedom of speech and to support more information rather than censored information. And that was an incredibly important part for me of this election. I think it also, people just underestimated how the economy, the impact of the economy on this election. And so I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that there's going to be a long road that is going to be a little bit painful. I still think that gold long term is going to be, just because it's down right now doesn't mean it's going to be down in the future. And I can see that coming back and being a real play this next year.
Yeah, I would say the bets to make right now is exactly that. Probably start allocating into these precious metals and assets that are extremely undervalued right now, because no matter what, we're going to have inflation domestically in the U.S. and worldwide. It's like you like to say, it's a feature, not a bug of the central banking system. So definitely put some of your money into assets that have a historical track record of maintaining their value. The flip side, though, is probably allocate into some of the opportunities that are set to really grow, and that's companies like Tesla and Palantir and AI driven companies that could see an enormous amount of upside. Ironically, so you got this kind of barbell strategy of these two things, but ironically, all that stuff that's actually might be really risky is the stuff in between, which are these legacy companies that may have had a century of success but have not pivoted enough to either be efficient within, they're too bureaucratic, or they haven't implemented enough tech as of recently, so they're not innovative enough. So we might have a lot of disruption, which is why, again, you should have some allocations to these disruptive companies that are embracing this new tech. But hey, what a time to be alive, right?
What a time to be alive.
I wouldn't trade it for any other time. And don't be negative on humanity, because we only have one option, and that's forward. So let's get after it.
And I hope this is a big wake up call for the mainstream media, and we're going to have as it breaks down and trust continues to erode from the mainstream media. I hope that there's going to be a cleaning of the house, and there'll be some people that come in and replace a lot of the people that did not tell the American people the truth about what was happening over the last really 4 years, and that they'll be replaced by people who realize that you just can't lie. You can't lie openly because there's enough information and ways to get to that information that people will find the truth. So
Yeah, I want to tell a quick story before we sign off here. I have
yeah,
a very good friend of mine who is a former U.S. congressman. He's almost a household name. I'm not going to say his name because you would know him. He retired probably a decade ago, maybe a little more. He never used a cell phone when he was in office. And the reason why I think that's important to understand is that we have an entire generation of politicians, and this is what I consider the deep state, that are so disconnected from reality, which is our economy, younger generations, etc. And they have been ruling the US and the world in this manner that they have for the past century, which is they use propaganda, they use narratives, and they assume that the public and general population doesn't actually know what's going on. And the entire facade is falling away right now, and it's on both sides of the aisle. It's the
it
old
is.
school
It's
right
both
neocons.
sides of the aisle,
It's
for
the
sure.
left. It's the Pelosi's. It's the Boltons.
So
It's
Lindsey
all of these.
Graham's.
Yes, it's all of them, and they're
Yeah.
getting caught. And we're basically the tide's going out, and they're all naked right now, and we're kind of pointing our fingers, laughing at them. But the problem is that we're all in this together. So it's not just them that suffers; it's going to be us as well. The flip side is that's the opportunity, and that's the opportunity right now for younger people to step up, get involved in politics, build companies, invest, be positive, get married, have babies, and make the world great again.
Signing off, another episode, another great episode. Thank you, Cody. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let us know your thoughts. Write us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what your thoughts are, what you liked, what you didn't like. Love you guys.
Hell yeah. And
Talk
go
to
to
you next
adventurecapitalist.com. Adventurecapitalist.com. Check out the site. We do have a weekly newsletter that goes out, sends some updates on what we're doing with the podcast and some cool pictures and stuff we're looking at. I was going to say shit we're looking at. and adventures and trips. We got some stuff planned ahead. So go to the website, check it out, because
Check it out.
we're definitely doing a lot of stuff we're not talking about on here.